And joining us now with more on the importance of the Philadelphi Corridor and the ongoing war against Hamas in Gaza is Jonathan Conricus, a senior fellow at the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies and a former IDF spokesperson. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So the Prime Minister held a press conference last night detailing the importance of the Philadelphi Corridor, saying Israel could not afford to leave or give it up. I mean, what can you tell us about this corridor? Why is it so important to Israel?
So I'll try to give an honest, professional opinion or point of view without getting into politics, like so many other things in Israel over this war and before the war. Almost everything is contaminated with politics, and what I will try to share is a military breakdown of what it is and why it's important. Let's go back to the disengagement from Gaza, 2005. The border between the Gaza Strip and Egypt, on the Israeli code maps, the name of the road was called Philadelphia, and since then it's stuck and it has become the Philadelphi Corridor. Nothing to do with the American city or Greek mythology. Why is it important? Because under the Philadelphi Corridor, Hamas has established through civilians, workers, and a few others, willing helpers, Hamas has established a mesh of tunnels that go from the Palestinian side of Rafah to the smaller but still existent Egyptian side of Rafah. And what they've basically been doing since the first day that they took control over Gaza is to use those tunnels to import, smuggle weapons, explosives, and everything else that they wanted. And it would be difficult for them to get their hands on directly through Egypt, and it would be impossible to get through Kerem Shalom, the Israeli crossing. So that has been something that we Israel, we've known about it for years, more than 25 years. There have been tunnels there even before the disengagement. It's not something new. Israel withdrew from the Gaza Strip in 2005, and since then, that area has not been in our hands. What Hamas has been doing since, over the last 20 years or over the last 18 years that they have been in control over the Gaza Strip, is to expand, deepen, enhance, and solidify the tunnels that they have there. And today the tunnel network that existed before October 7th is a very robust tunnel system, but don't think tunnels that are small and cramped and, for personnel, the small tunnels that Hamas dug in order to infiltrate into Israel. Think industrial, think big enough for trucks to go in. Now, the purpose is to move commodities from the Egyptian side with the willing assistance of Egyptian authorities and either turning a blind eye or collecting money, and that's an important part. The Egyptian authorities, the Egyptian military gains from the illicit trade and the smuggling from Egypt into Gaza. And what Hamas has been doing is simply transporting in weapons. All of the weapons that Hamas used on October the 7th to butcher Israeli civilians came in through the Philadelphia Corridor. Maybe a small percentage came in above ground in the Rafah crossing, but I would say that Israeli assessments speak about the vast, overwhelming majority of weapons came in through these tunnels. This is why the tunnels are important, and this is why the Philadelphia Corridor in itself has importance. Now, when Israel launched its offensive against Hamas 3 weeks after October 7, Israel decided to go for the northern part of the Gaza Strip and Gaza City. We didn't go for Philadelphia. At the time, I asked questions why, because in my mind, just as a lieutenant colonel in the military, to me it seemed very reasonable that we would go parallel on the center of gravity, which is Gaza City, but also immediately cut off the line of supply and basically the oxygen supply of Hamas.
And why didn't we?
That's a very good question. That the same person who did a press conference today for the first time in many, many months and actually answered questions and presented something to the Israeli public, that's a question for him and the cabinet to answer. I don't know. Above my pay grade, as you would say.
I do want to ask you, though, because there are conflicting reports. On the one hand, we hear from the defense establishment that we can leave the Philadelphia Corridor, that we can leave, we can come back. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu insisting that that's not the case. I mean, who's correct here? What's your assessment of this?
So my point of view would be that it doesn't matter so much if you are in Philadelphia, if you go back, if you leave it, if you can return, what matters is what are the plans, the military plans for when you are there. What are the engineering activities and what are the military activities? Because sitting on top of Philadelphi Corridor is pretty useless. You can control the Rafah crossing, which is important, but that is not where the bulk of weapons came in. What you need to do is a significant engineering operations where you basically have to dig a big canal or a tunnel across approximately 14 kilometers, say roughly 10 miles, from the southern part of the Gaza Strip all the way up to the ocean. That's the length of the Gaza Strip in that area. And do it deep enough, let's say 50 meters, 60 meters deep. So I'm talking about a significant engineering activity here, something that Israel can do if it wants to. That will ensure or make it extremely difficult for Hamas to return to smuggling. But unless Israel has intentions and plans and military engineering that is tasked to do that, then sitting on top of Philadelphia isn't really the important topic. So what I want to hear from my leaders is, okay, not only do we intend to sit and hold the Philadelphi Corridor for political and negotiation purposes, but we also intend to take the military action to stop the tunneling and to stop Hamas from rebuilding.
But Israel has destroyed a significant number of tunnels on the Philadelphia Corridor, has it not?
Yes, but it's going about it the cumbersome and indirect way. What Israel is doing now, what our brave soldiers are doing on the field while risking themselves and fighting a very ruthless enemy in Rafah, is that they're basically going for the openings. They're going for the shafts that they locate through lots of intel, lots of research, through interrogations of terrorists and compiling other sources of information. And then they go search for the entrance. They get the entrance and then they go down. They disable it, but large parts of the tunnel still exist and it can be accessible from other points, and terrorists, if they have the freedom to do so, will link up with them again. So a real solution would be an engineering project of national dimensions.
But we have to also remember the hostages, of course, as we just saw this weekend, hostages being held in the tunnels in Rafah. So that would, I assume, complicate matters in terms of having to destroy the tunnels.
But they're not the same tunnels. We're not talking about the same tunnels. According to all that we've seen so far and heard from hostages that were released and what we've seen in Hamas footage, etc., the tunnels where Israeli hostages have been kept for 333 days are probably not the smuggling tunnels. These are different areas. These are tunnels that aren't as deep, and these are tunnels that are extremely well hidden, and specifically not along that area in Rafah, because the terrorists know that that is a point of interest for Israel.
And so we're almost out of time, but I do want to ask you one quick question about the ongoing hostage negotiations. You know, President Biden openly saying that Netanyahu is not doing enough to get a hostage deal. Netanyahu saying he's accepted the U.S. proposals, but it's Hamas that has rejected every deal that's been put on the table. Now the U.S. once again pressuring Israel. How much of, first of all, what do you make of this, the fact that the U.S. is pressuring Israel and not Hamas? And also, Biden saying he'll put forward this one final deal. Is Philadelphia the main issue holding up the deal, do you think?
First of all, the main issue holding up the deal is Hamas. Full stop. Hamas is the organization that stands to gain the most from not making a deal, and as such, I think that is the most important point. And I think that it's extremely regrettable that we find ourselves in a situation under this government and prime minister where there's such a tremendous deficit in trust and good faith between Israeli leadership and our closest and most important ally, that our closest and most important ally actually puts public pressure on us instead of on our enemy. But the most important thing, I think, that isn't discussed is what could force Hamas to the negotiations table and what could force Hamas to take our deal and to submit itself to our dictations. If Hamas is pressured and feels that its control over Gaza is at stake and jeopardized, then they would be incentivized to do more and to be more flexible, and what's important for us, to bring back live hostages. Currently, sadly, that is not the situation. The Israeli government and military have, but most importantly the government, hasn't put that kind of pressure on Hamas. And pressure on Hamas isn't tanks in the streets of Khan Yunis, Gaza, or Rafah. It is for Yahya Sinwar to understand that it's just a matter of time before he and his organization are out of power, and that the people of Gaza will rebel against him, and that there is an alternate government. Who will put that government in place? Who will make sure that that happens? One country, Israel. That's what we need to be doing in order to apply pressure. I think that will put Hamas's feet to the fire and higher the chances of us getting our beloved brothers and sisters back.
All right. Well, Jonathan Conricus, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today.
Thank you.